where we're seeing burnout at rates we've never seen before.
Yeah.
Around 45% of U.S. employees report experiencing burnout, according to a 2024 survey. Another study found nearly 2/3, 66% of workers say they are actively burned out in 2025. 66%, right? More than half of anybody that you see working,
they're burned out,
is considering themselves as burned out.
So they're going to give pretty bad customer service.
What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Hey, before we jump into the podcast, we want to thank all our donors and supporters who make the Today Count show possible. It's through your generosity that we're able to shape leaders through this content and this podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you find yourself coming across this content. All right, let's get to the podcast. Have you ever asked yourself the question, I'm not sure I can do this anymore? Maybe specifically, I'm not sure I can work here anymore. Maybe you're listening or watching this right now and you find yourself questioning your current work responsibilities and somehow you've arrived at the reality that maybe you're burning out. This isn't just for workplaces. This is just in life. You might be finding yourself burning out. My name is Winston Harris, and I'm your co-host here at the Today Count show. And I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend. I know him as Game Winner Jim, but none other than Jim Piper. How are we doing today, Jim?
We're doing pretty well. We're hanging in there.
We're hanging in there. We're not burning out.
We're not burning out. I will not burn out again.
And I mean, speaking about burnout, Jim, have you ever experienced burnout? You just say, I'm not going to burn out again.
I have. And hopefully we'll get into that a little bit today.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't mind, I mean, maybe just right off the top here, as we're just talking about a reality that, I think many people face in many different spaces and walks of life. And we kind of hear this is kind of a buzzword. And so we'll even touch on some of this, how real is burnout versus just life difficulties and, challenges. But what is real burnout? What's been your experience with burnout?
Well, I don't think I was even aware of the term, when I was younger. So when I was younger, it was work hard, play hard, live for the weekend. And, here comes Monday. But if it wasn't for my youth, I bet you I would have discovered burnout pretty early and pretty often. The reasons for that, looking back, not to be rude or crude, really would not have been that hard to see, or diagnose. But in the moment, I suppose, I just would say, man, I'm burned out and I'm beat up, whatever. Yeah.
Because people throw that term out kind of casually, but I mean, there's some significant things that come along with burnout, just some signs of burnout here that, we'll mention. You can, if you were to do a quick Google search or anything, something like this would come up, but constant exhaustion, trouble sleeping, maybe even you're getting rest, but you're not rested. Right. There's no amount of physical sleep that can help the type of tired, you might be experiencing. There's emotional numbness, just feeling detached, cynical, which, a lot of people, that's kind of a subtle thing. Some people think that's a personality trait, but, that can definitely be a indicator that there is burnout happening. Irritable, right? Being really short with people, a loss of joy. Right? Just normal activities and responsibilities become heavy. There's this sense of dread and just not looking forward to the day. Cognitive difficulties, really hard to focus, right? And once again, this can get misconstrued in our day and age because there's a lot of distractions, but being able to lock in on something, trouble making decisions, being really indecisive can be a symptom of burnout. And stuff like headaches, loss of appetite, and once again, just poor sleep, just really can't get into, that deep sleep. And, one thing personally, I remember experiencing, I worked at J. Crew for a season of my life. And, that customer service space is really, really difficult, to work in. You got to have some tough skin in customer service. And specifically, I was in a seat that would handle like escalated phone calls.
Mm.
And so, I'm getting the worst of humanity daily. Like I'm just getting
Bring it on.
unloaded on like over what I would, say is just silly stuff. Like I literally remember a phone call about socks. Somebody lost their socks and they're just railing me. They're just going off on me, and people get really courageous over a phone over long distances, and they can say all kinds of stuff. And so I just remember day after day, experiencing that. And there was a specific day. I remember I got up.
You don't get any good phone calls, do you?
No, there was no good phone calls.
That could be an ingredient right there for burnout.
Yeah. I mean, literally the job title is essentially like escalated phone call guy.
Right.
Like that, like that's like the 90% of what we're doing. And I can just remember getting up, knowing that it was a work day, and I just sat at the edge of the bed and just exhaled. And I just really had to like get myself out of bed. Like it was really hard to just get off the edge of my bed. I literally remember thinking, I do not want to do this. This can't be all there is.
Yeah, I call that the Sunday night effect. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, a lot of times when I'm sensing burnout in one of my clients, I'll say, hey, tell me what you're thinking about around 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock Sunday night. And often they'll say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it's an open question. What are you thinking about? He goes, well, I'm dreading tomorrow morning. That's a sign of burnout.
Yeah, that I was there. I just, in the pit of my stomach, I was just like, there's a knot, and I just really couldn't think about anything that I was looking forward to. And I do remember there were moments where I got to almost like physically anxious, like just didn't feel well. Like, and I was like, I don't know how long I can keep doing this. And ultimately, I end up stepping out of that space and feeling a call to ministry. And that was the whole God thing in and of itself. And that's another episode, another story for another day.
Yeah.
But burnout's real.
Burnout is real.
Burnout is real. And in your estimation, how do you think a lot of people, myself included, maybe yourself, or maybe even people you've been in proximity to, how do we get there?
Yeah, well, obviously, whenever you ask me a question, my mind goes all over the place, right? So I have to try to organize my thoughts inside, 2 seconds. But, at this table, I'm a baby boomer and you're a
millennial.
And that right there there's a gap there. And so, I came from a generation. Now, granted, I'm a younger baby boomer. I think most baby boomers would see themselves in their 70s, and I'm in my mid 60s. But in those days, back in those days, in the 1970s and early 1980s, when you joined something, and when you joined an organization, generally your idea was that you were going to retire with that organization. And inside that organization, because those kinds of organizations were kind of forward leaning in the sense of understanding psychology, but also the culture was all about that, finishing what you start, being a loyal employee. You got your watch when you retired, you got a ring in 10 years, you got all of these. So everything was built in to finishing this race. And so when the baby boomers or even the generation earlier than that, the builders, sometimes when they look at the millennials or the Xers or even the Gen Zers, we have a misunderstanding. There's sometimes a judgment that is placed upon the younger generations by the older generation. But what I do think there is something to that, which I'll speak to in a minute. But on the other side of it, though, we've learned a lot about ourselves over the years. So, for example, to answer your question, I think the place I experienced the most burnout was when I did not realize that the way that I am wired, I had already ran my race. but there was more to do within this organization. But as far as I as an individual was concerned, I had run my race, and I was probably 5 years past that time. But I did not understand myself well enough at that time to navigate the culture of the organization, along with the way that I believe that God wires me and makes me most effective. So all those symptoms that you described in the front end of the episode, I was going, I didn't check every one of them, but there was at least half of them. I'm going, yep, I experienced that. So watch this. If I live by the good old ways,
tradition,
I would still be there.
What do you mean?
Well, I would not have moved on. I would not have come to the realization that I was ready for a new challenge, a new hill,
Gotcha.
a new mountain to climb. I would be doing my duty, staying there, doing that, even if that meant I was completely miserable and could not, get up in the morning to do, what I needed to do. So, that is one of the key things that I do think leads to burnout and is a credible argument for this thing called burnout. Is I do believe that some were made to start somewhere and end there, but others are starters, others are fixers, others, I can go through all kinds of different ideas. Does that make a little bit of sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's.
I
great.
I only covered a little bit, but
yeah, and when we're talking about this idea of burnout, I think there was a major shift in 2020 in just the workforce in the marketplace in general, and just some things to consider here, where we're seeing burnout at rates we've never seen before.
Yeah.
Around 45% of U.S. employees report experiencing burnout, according to a 2024 survey. Another study found nearly 2/3, 66% of workers say they are actively burned out in 2025. 66%, right? More than half of anybody that you see working,
they're burned out,
is considering themselves as burned out.
So they're going to give pretty bad customer service.
Yeah, I'm sure I gave some pretty terrible customer service. That guy, whoever called about the socks, pretty sure he didn't get the socks. He did not get the socks. Some other reports, 72% of U.S. workers face moderate to very high job stress, a strong precursor to burnout. And then, watch this. 38% of employees are quitting within the first year of their job.
Yeah.
Almost, once again, we're getting close to half people aren't even making it 90 days, some reports say. And so this just kind of begs the question, and maybe just kind of frames the rest of this conversation. Is today's workforce more fragile than it's ever been? Or is there a broken system?
How about I go halfway and say that today's workforce hasn't adapted well to the new way that we go about work?
Talk to me about that.
So I'm going to bring in a third party here, Patrick Lencioni, in his Working Genius. I think makes it, I'm not going to simplify it just to this point, but to oversimplify it, the way he describes it is there are 6 geniuses that we employ for every project, every business, anything that we do. And to make it very simple, there's a beginning and there's a maintaining or inside to it, and then you can kind of break up those 6 geniuses into 3. If I remember right, is ideation is the first, implementation, and I forget what the other one is.
Execution, maybe,
or maybe the other way around. And the reason I always forget that third one because I'm not in that one.
I'm in that one.
Okay, so watch this. And 2 of those are literally labeled as my frustrations, meaning I'm just not wired to do it. So if my work concentrates on something that I don't like to do, I'm going to burn out. Watch this. He says, but for most people, they don't end up in those roles. There's just something about God's design, something about the way life works, where we do know, we go, ooh, I don't like that. I'll stay away from that.
I'm not going to be a lumberjack anytime soon.
Right. There's a lot of things that I see that I go, yeah, I'm out. I don't want to do that. But believe it or not, in his work, he says, okay, he says, you got two geniuses. It's not an exact science, but it's pretty good theory because it goes back way, frankly, into the mid 1900s. It was just different terminology. But generally speaking, we're good at a couple of things, and then there's a couple of things that we're competent in. You ready for this? We end up getting burned out a lot of times because a lot of our work is in our competencies, not in our geniuses, which fulfills us and encourages us. Let me say it this way: the difference between working. All right. So when someone said, you use the term stress. So when someone says, I'm stressed out, here's what's really weird. What stresses you out may not stress somebody else out. But if we could flip them, if they could trade jobs, I know it's an oversimplification, but if we could trade jobs often, that stress would be greatly reduced.
That's a great point. That's a great point, because there's some things that require a lot of effort, but I walk away with that thing that is in my competency as you're describing, and I'll be like, feel energized.
Yeah.
Even though I exerted a lot of effort, it was in a place that I felt competent in or thoroughly enjoyed the challenge. And, whether the outcome was or wasn't what I wanted it to be, it wasn't life draining. It was life giving.
But what you got to be careful of is you could actually be good at something and not be fulfilled in it. But you can get positive feedback from your community. Says, you're so good at that. Will you do this? Will you do this? Will you do this? And if a lot of those things are in your competency area, not in your fulfillment area, that will burn you out. But now you're performing for the wrong reasons. You're performing to please others, not from that place of strength and fulfillment. There's a lot of when people break down what I do for a living, a lot of them look like, as they're listening to me explain it to them, it's like they're sucking on lemons with their facial expressions. It's like, you like doing that? And I go, it's not, I never said it was easy work. I never said it was flippant. It was so easy I didn't even think about it. No, I never said that, but I am fulfilled doing that work. So no matter how hard it is, it doesn't. Now, do I need rest? We'll talk about all of that later, I assume. But I think that's what we can easily misunderstand. What I'm good at does not necessarily equate to what fulfills me. I could have become good at it for a lot of different reasons. I could have learned it as a child. It could have been my upbringing. I could have learned something in school. Academically, I might know how to do this or do that. But it doesn't, I'll give you an example. Back in the day, I would have been considered really proficient doing spreadsheets. If you asked me to do a spreadsheet, I probably can knock off the rust and create some nice spreadsheets for you. But I'm telling you right now, it would not fulfill me. And by the time I get done the project, I'm not going to be liking you very much. That would be an example.
Yeah. And how often do you come across leaders or people that are operating in competencies but aren't operating in fulfillment? And how do you close that gap?
All the time. I did it when I started the Lead Today community. People would ask, because I did not have a clear set of offerings. And so when people said, hey, do you guys do this? Well, I'm trying to put food on the table. What I heard is, can you do this? And so my answer was, yes, we can. And so we did. But there wasn't joy in it. There wasn't fulfillment in it. There was a coming of burnout, because now I'm trading my time for money to do something that I don't really like doing. And so over time, I found that we had to narrow our menu of offerings and services to the things that I thoroughly believed we were called to do, and that brought me fulfillment. A lot of job descriptions that, to answer your question more specifically, at least from my opinion, a lot of job descriptions, people will read through it and go, yep, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And every once in a while, if you say, hey, I want you to read through this job description, but I want you to think out loud. And then I'll give them some free phrases. I mean, I've actually done this. Say, yeah, I can do that. I'll need to learn how to do that. Oh, yeah, I like doing that. Oh, I'm really good at that. Oh man, I can't wait to, just talk to. It's really interesting. I've never seen anyone go through a job description. I love that. I love that. Oh, can I do more of that? Can I do more of that? More of that? More? No, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
So reality is that your job is a mixed bag. And I don't think the objective is to get away from not doing things that you may not be good at or may just be competent in. But I'm saying that the knowledge of how much of your job requires that is really important in order to navigate burnout.
Something I kind of want to shift gears on a little bit is the atmosphere in which people work and the dynamics in which we find kind of the workplace today in 2026. And one thought I've kind of always had, just being in the workforce, is why do we still work like 8-hour days? Just from a social, sociology standpoint, a modern day society. We've had all of these innovations and all of these ways that we've moved forward as a society, yet seemingly the agricultural framework, the mid 19th century, I looked this up, Henry Ford implemented the 8-hour workday,
manufacturing,
in 1914.
Yeah
And we're still,
that's up to date,
for some reason kind of functioning still in that way. And it, to your point, you've kind of said that earlier, we've not adapted to kind of what is actually happening, the way people are living. And there's a leadership coach and consultant, Greg Bosch, that I follow, and he had some specific things to say that I loved, and so I just want to quote him here. He said, "Many studies have shown that the 8-hour workday, which is a relic of the 19th century factory work, doesn't actually work. We aren't built we aren't built to do creative, thoughtful, deep work for 8 hours straight in one static environment with a lunch break wedged in the middle. Many of the same studies find that most of us are only actually productive for about 3 to 4 hours each day. The rest of the time spent in the office is a productivity charade." And I feel like I've seen that, I've experienced that there's this like pseudo productivity that's happening, and there's this like weird need for the illusion of progress and the illusion of activity that we have to at least seem busy, right? To make sure that our employees, it feels like we're paying them, and maybe even the metrics and the productivity that we're seeing on spreadsheets isn't quite matching the time invested in the office. And I think what 2020 did was really challenge this idea that, like, do I need to be in the office to get work done?
Wow.
Did I just hit a nerve?
Man, you are a millennial. Just kidding. I actually am just kidding.
Great leaders don't ignore their past. They learn from it. Every decision you've made, every mistake, every win, every failure, it's all shaping the leader you're becoming. In Story, the art of learning from your past, you'll discover how to turn experience into wisdom, setbacks into strategy, and pain into purpose. This isn't just a book about reflection, it's a playbook for growth. If you want to lead with clarity, humility, and confidence, your story matters. Learn from it. Grab your copy of Story, the art of learning from your past, where books are sold.
You brought up so many really good points that are very difficult to argue with when you do your homework and you reflect upon your own life. If you are self-aware, let's go back to Peter Drucker. And if we're dropping names that you're not familiar with, and you're a learner and a leader, I would encourage you to write these names down, to learn. We've thrown 3 names out already today. Patrick Lencioni, who did you say?
Greg Bosch,
and then Peter Drucker. So Peter Drucker started separating hands-on work from a lot of mental people work, design work, that kind of work, abstract work versus concrete work, as knowledge workers. And and then of course we haven't even talked about introvert extrovert, which plays a role. So when I go into a really busy office, I'm more of an introvert than I am an extrovert. I'm right on the borderline. But when it comes to getting stuff done, I go into introverted mode.
Yep.
Because it's a focus mode for me.
Same.
And if I go into an office with all kinds of, fun camaraderie and hi-fi and singing, we love the world and all of that, That's a drainer for me. That is very unproductive for me. I'm not saying I don't need people. I'm not saying I don't need community, because that's not true. What I usually do is get my stuff done. Then I come disrupt your world, which can be a selfish thing to do. I just think about how well I work, to your script that you were just talking about. I am best in the morning after I have my morning rhythm for what I need, which I know we're going to get into this still, because that comes back to the adapting, to what's going on in our work world today. But there are days where I get a lot of really good stuff done in 3 to 4 hours, and frankly, I'm done. I'm done. Now, what do I do with the rest of that day? Well, it depends. Sometimes I can be domestified and I can go out and run errands. Sometimes I can get a second workout in. Sometimes I can read a book. Lo and behold, sometimes I can invest in some relationships. I can call my brothers and my sister. I can call my mom and my dad. I can do the kind of those quality things in life. But your thinking machine, I think, is different than your physical working machine. I think you can work 8 hours if you are a landscaper.
Right.
You're gonna go do 8 hours because your body's not yet tired, and your body will continue, to go. Here's the other thing I didn't mention. If I'm working as a knowledge worker for a few hours, there's something weird that calls my name in the garage or in my office or out in the back or at the pickleball court. My body wants to do something physically.
That's good.
Right. So I'm learning from that. And then, those that work with their hands day in and day out, I don't, so I can't speak, for them. But I have found a lot of very well-informed people who work out in the field because they do hunger for some of that. They usually have what I call intellectual hobbies. They seem to know a lot about the Civil War. They seem to know a lot about this or that, and that's kind of how they fill their knowledge bank, so to speak. Anyway, that's some things to think about.
Yeah, and I've heard it said that some of the major medical issues that specifically Americans see can be directly correlated to the fact that we sit for so long.
Sitting is the new cancer.
8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours at a desk, to your point of knowledge workers versus, those who are active. And the majority of people that which interestingly enough, I mean, maybe let's take a little detour here. How many people do we feel like talk about burnout who are physically working versus those who are
That's such a good point.
At a desk, right?
I don't work with a lot of people who do that, but I'm around them because their supervisors are, people that I would work with. So sometimes I do get in the field and I get to meet, linemen or I said
boots on the ground.
Yeah, boots on the ground. Landscaper came in my mind because I have landscaping organizations where I get to meet, some of these people. No, you're right. I don't ever hear them. In fact, the weekend for them is different, I think, than the weekend for the knowledge worker. It's interesting. And I do remember a boss telling me, and for the life of me, I cannot remember what employer, but I do remember the first time I heard this, I didn't believe it. But he said to me, I really don't care how many hours you work. What I'm looking for is the results. And, I was so programmed that I didn't know what to do with that. I thought, is he joking? Is he serious? Because I do work fast. I get a lot of things done fast. And the thought of going out and playing softball would be great, or golf or whatever. And I do believe that in some environments you will hear that, and they really do mean that. And that usually kind of tests, if you're an executor, it tests how fast you can get things done. If you're a leader, how well you can get things done through others. But then I also wonder where the breakdown is there. If you're a leader and you put in 4 hours a day, but you expect everybody else to put in 8 or 10, then there's a problem there, I think. So your question to me is not a simple one. It's layered. It's a systemic
cultural issue that is bleeding into, corporate America. And some other interesting, stats here around this idea of the 8-hour workday, and why we're still kind of functioning in this framework versus why aren't maybe leaders and companies considering a different approach. Some companies have, smaller companies usually, in it
4-day work weeks.
Yep. Some stats say here that companies that offer more flexible schedules see 33% lower turnover rates. 97% of employees say that they would stay at their company, just like you're talking about, this kind of commitment to long-term, finishing what you started. 97% would stay if flexible work were available. And then 75% of remote workers feel as productive or more productive with flexible schedules. And so the question, that I often kind of just, when I have time to just think,
right.
One of the things I question is why does it appear that leaders or companies hire people they don't trust?
Yeah, I'm trust was the word, you took it. So keep going.
Yeah. That's a Patrick Lencioni teaching, one of the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Yeah.
And it seems like I have to see somebody in the office to trust that they're working.
Yeah, you're doing it more for yourself than you are for your team. If you're sitting in front of a therapist as a leader and you're complaining to the therapist that, gosh, so-and-so came in at such and such time and left at such and such time, a good therapist would say, talk to me about that. What are you feeling there? Well, I'm feeling like I'm being cheated. That's what would be said. What else would be said? I mean, if they don't say that they're feeling cheated, then what would they say? Something to think about. Now, if they're not working visually the way you think they should be, and the results aren't there, then you can say 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
But if their work is being done, and then what are we holding on to? Well, then it tells the other employees that, they can leave whenever they want to leave, but they don't get their work done. So which is it? Is it about their work, or is it about hours, or is it both? So if I got all my work done, do I just sit there can I pull out a chessboard and start working on my chess game? Would that be okay? Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies in what we do.
Yeah. There's
we want validation. I think sometimes if leaders don't think through it, they want some validation, because, being a leader, being a boss, being a business owner is a very stressful thing. I mean, you've got to make payroll. And so sometimes let me stick up for the leader for a minute. The heaviness and the weight of paying the bills, serving the customers and providing the payroll for these people is heavy. If you've never done that, then, you should be careful what you say. Because it's a heavy thing. In fact, the thing we often teach about is you're looking for employees that have an owner's mindset. Well, think about it though. So an owner's mindset is going to be, they're going to steward the resources of the organization. They're going to steward their own time. And so you can trust them if you do not see them there visually, you're trusting them. And if any of that trust breaks down, that's the core issue right there is that trust factor. Now, I'll ask you this, how you feel about it. I mean, you played basketball. That's what you were really good at. I wrestled. That's what I was really good at. I thought I was good at other things, but apparently not. On every wrestling team, there was definitely varsity wrestlers, JV wrestlers, less than. And then with every elevated group, there was another elevated group and an elevated group. And so sometimes, the expectation that we're going to have all major contributors, is probably not realistic. It's probably not normal. You're going to have your A+++, your A, your A-, your B. Let's just talk. I mean, even in Scripture, the parable of the talents, talks about that. The giftedness that God gives to people is different, but you tend to also pay wages according to that. So there's your adjustable trust factor. You can actually adjust your trust toward compensation toward them. But then that opens up other doors of all this other, socialism that, we'll want to talk about, fairness for everybody versus meritocracy. I mean, it's pretty hard to isolate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very. I think about what's the word when a diamond, multifaceted, very multifaceted. Situation. Yeah, and even kind of drilling back into that trust factor. Being able to play on some very bad teams and being able to play on some very good teams, some championship teams in different spaces. Trust was a core fundamental element in teams that won. And the teams that I experienced winning. And it was to the point where I was willing to make sacrifices, whether it was less playing time or a different role or a different position, if I knew that my teammates or my coaching staff actually cared and that we're all in alignment and we're all going to the same goal. But if it felt like we're all out for ourselves, if I'm trying to score 40 and you're trying to score 40 and I can't trust you to cover my guy if I get beat, in basketball terms, once it got siloed, once it got, I can't trust you. I need to focus on what's best for me. I need to make sure that I get my highlight film package and I get to the next level. And
we didn't have those.
What did they have back then? Recorders? I don't know. Slides.
The annual banquet.
Annual banquet. Those two words even. But that trust was essential in just healthy team dynamics. And I think we can't, miss that enough, that, some of the burnout issues can stem from maybe this culture of distrust in workplaces and in teams.
Yeah. Maybe the message is that as a leader, you are looking, for leaders who then, lead their teams, recognizing that there's going to be what would you call that? Just a variety of performances, and those performances be paid accordingly. It's true in everything. It's true in business. It's true in sports. You're all stars. The thing about an all-star, though, that we've learned in professional sports and college sports is that what's really weird about this conversation is that an all-star, when you do the homework, most of them, unless I'm wrong, they tend to put in more work. But if you're requiring somebody to put in the work, then what you might be doing is spending more energy on the wrong people.
Or the wrong things.
The wrong things, maybe.
And I want to kind of take this quick direction, but there's this corporate culture that seems to be being almost swallowed by culture, societal culture. And it's the way that we communicate in the workplace. And I think this is also contributing to burnout in that, this what is seemingly lower friction communication, instant messaging, emails, even just the meeting culture. There almost seems to be this phenomenon where we're meeting about work more than we're actually working. And your 8-hour workday, 6 hours of that day is emailing about a project, and you're meeting about the project, and you're talking about the project, and there's a lot of collaboration, but you're not actually working on the project. So people are having to find time to actually work on the project outside of work, which is adding more of this, not just workload, but cognitive workload, this, mental, psychological weight of this constant motion. And we know spiritually that can't end well if you're constantly on, if there's this kind of 24/7, you're always on call, even if you're off the clock. To keep your job, seemingly, you're having to make up, the deficit, because the organizational culture is kind of drawing you into all these communications. How do you, frame that? What do you think leaders or, those who have the ability to influence organizational culture, what might they need to reconsider?
Yeah, my mind goes again back to both Peter Drucker and the contemporary Patrick Lencioni, because it seems like, we're attacking the subject from the outside in, whereas both of these guys are attacking the problem from the inside out, meaning that Drucker made it really clear that, you go inside to write the mission statement, and then everyone's job within their context is to serve the mission. So it's an inside out process. It sounds like what you're saying is that, and then I'll switch over to Patrick's view, is we spend a lot of times in meetings. So the question is, are they the right kind of meetings for everyone who's in the meeting? I think I said that well. And what Patrick has exposed is what he calls turbulence in communication, is that you've got people who have assignments to execute, and then you've got idea people who are trying to solve larger problems, and then you try to put them in the same meeting, and probably nobody's being served in those kinds of meetings. And so we often do not identify the purpose of a meeting first. That's inside out, and therefore who should be in the meeting. Now that can change over the process, the evolution of a project, going from creation to implementation. But from an organizational structure place, I think that is what I see the most that can contribute to burnout. And I'll say it again. It's what we call, what Patrick Lencioni calls leadership turbulence, or communication turbulence. That those folks that are on the left side of the scale, on the ideation side, think and talk at a high elevation, most susceptible to change. Then you have the middle group that takes that and begins to develop it and massage it to the button-up group that executes it and finishes it. If you were just to divide those three sections into elevation, you have turbulence. And so the handoff from one section to the next is delicate in and of itself, if you're following me. Mm-hmm. What we often see, particularly not just in small organizations, but in large organizations, that's what we see. So what happens is you end up in a meeting, and that meeting is asking for you to engage your frustrations that I talked about earlier, because you would have to engage your frustrations to be a contributor at this such and such elevation of a meeting, versus your fulfilling strengths or geniuses. So it just seems to me that not to put blame on everybody, but I'll say it again, we tend to think and speak according to the elevation of our strengths. And if that person who is thinking and speaking is at the top of the org chart, then they're going to, if they're not consciously aware of that, then they're going to tend to create meetings that don't serve the best interest of the organization and the individuals in the organization.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, if you're a business leader, if you have any kind of influence in an organization, like, this is the podcast that you need to be tapping into. Listen to it again, because Jim is dropping some gems, as well as share with other leaders and other team members, because this is, once again, an inside out proposition. If we don't get people who are growing and learning in these spaces to be able to influence, your organizations, then, we'll never see the change we want to see. I think we can move towards landing the plane with just helping people who are listening or watching, just take some maybe practical considerations about what they should do when they feel like they're facing burnout. Maybe they're beyond burnout, but what are some responses to the potential of burnout?
Yeah, again, inside out, margin. When I'm on the road, hardworking, and I see it mostly in middle management. To be frank, I see most burnout in middle management.
Why do you think that is?
Well, in some ways, to stick up for them, in some ways they have to be the best 360-degree leaders on the planet, and no one's really trained them how to do that, and because that ain't easy. I mean, you've got colleagues that you need to woo and collaborate with to especially if you work for any size organization, move forward. Then, of course, you have people that is on your team, your direct reports, below you. And then, of course, you have superiors in the sense of organizational, the business world calls it control. I would like to call it span of care versus span of control, but nevertheless. And so, and then if they're customer facing, then add on to that, right? I mean, there's a lot there. And I would also say that we tend to promote people to middle management who probably, it's probably not fair to promote them. Going back to points that you were alluding to earlier, is that the other thing that probably needs to be adjusted, and of course, those of you listening to this, I know you're yelling back at me and you're going, yeah, but, and unfortunately it's not a two-way conversation. So I can't hear the protest, and I know there's protests, but just hear me out. So sometimes we have somebody that's really, really, really good at doing this certain thing. And so instead of figuring out a way to compensate them more, to give them the value, a sense of value and a message that we need you here exactly where you're at, doing what you're doing and influencing what you're doing, we got to promote them. And then we promote them to a place where all of a sudden they're trading their geniuses into some sort of, at best, competencies, if not frustrations. And now we've, again, hurt the organization. But, you know, we're so Super Bowl minded in the US that if I don't climb the ladder to CEO, somehow I have failed. And no one may not say that, but it's in this, it goes up the spine, the unconscious spine of most Americans who have ambition, who are achievers anyway, in that way, shape, or form. Yeah, that was a great question. So I think what I mean by inside out is, in the margin, from a theological perspective, I know this, to the tough-minded guys, this sounds so silly, soft. But think about it. Do you see God as soft? I don't. In fact, my one of the first illustrations I ever pulled out when I was dealing with God was he's more like a rock, something that I could not move, and I don't always like that. That I like it when he protects me, but I don't like it when he won't move the way I want him to move. That's why I see him as this big rock.
Wow.
I say this all the time, Winston, you know it, but I do believe God is big enough to be small enough to care about me. So in the center of me, I do believe there is this very unique place that only God and I are allowed to go. I don't think anybody else is allowed to go there. When I die, when I take my last breath, even if you're holding my hand, you're connected to one of my senses. You're not going with me. So it's in that place. And that place is kind of what informs my soul, which is that very usable control center of judgment and decisions and feelings, you know, and strength in my life, which then informs my body, and the soul animates the body. But when the world, which isn't all bad, but when the world influences my body, it has a way of also informing my soul. But if I live from the inside out, my soul will be able to properly interpret what's coming in from the outside. So I would say in Stephen Covey, that's the fourth name we're throwing out, in Stephen Covey terms, it comes back to things you and I have talked about before, quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is the really, really important things, but not the urgent things. And things that are really important for you that are also not urgent are the easiest things for you to procrastinate and to put off. And it's those things that keep you, that will keep you from burning out. You know, exercise, reading, taking time off. If you can negotiate a better relationship with your organization and not be bound to this strict thing, because if you're like me, I'll say this from personal experience. Now, I'm a bit of a risk taker, so if I bent somebody's nose out of shape and got fired, okay, that's the way it goes. You know. But what I would negotiate is, hey, if I need to put in 14 hours, I will put in 14 hours. But if I need to put in 3, I'm going to put in 3. Deal? And that's the kind of thing. And, then as far as the comparison thing where the leader says, yeah, but if I do that for you, I can do that for everybody else. He said, well, you can do that for everybody else. That'll work too, if they perform. And if they point their fingers at me and they say, well, you go talk to Jim, see how Jim gets it done. And, I know there's not a perfect answer for every situation, because some organizations got everything buttoned down. Yeah. I mean, they got HR looking over your shoulder every time you sneeze. So, which is a whole nother culture. And I keep getting hate letters from HR people. I do love you. I do.
Might need to do an episode on HR. Hit a nerve. Yep. Chalk it up. That's coming.
Yeah. There's a place for HR. It's a very important place. And that's the whole thing. Stay in your place. But we'll talk about that. Yeah. Burnout is, I would just say it this way. If I've been burned out, so that's my confession. And most of that came from insecurity. Not, I was always a high achiever. And insecurity can be a part of high achievers. People pleasing. And so that contributes to burnout. So, courage needs to develop in one's life, where they don't become a jerk, a joker, or a jackass, but they become strong. And when you're strong, you can help people and you can help organizations. Strong doesn't mean mean. Mean is a different thing.
Yeah. On the theological side, the scripture that came to mind is, he that, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And speaking to that, that margin and, whatever is driving us to say yes, whatever is driving us to work the 80 hours, the 100 hours, even if we can justify it, right? I mean, there's a lot of opportunities out there that, okay, I'm going to be able to provide for my family, or I'm going to be able to, provide for my mom, or, care for my, sick family members, or be able to impact my community. There's all these justifiable reasons, except have we wrestled with the fact that what is the sacrifice?
Yeah.
And if the sacrifice is the soul, AKA burnout, then, are we truly willing to pay that price? I don't think that's a price that we want to pay. And, for those who are listening or, watching, I might make this statement: burnout is a decision.
It is. And even if you claim that you didn't know any better, you still made a lot of small decisions, toward that you did know better. And the culmination of a lot of bad, small, bad, whatever the right order is, of decisions, we have to take responsibility for, for our lives.
Yeah. Well, this has been, hopefully helpful and encouraging. I know just listening, to Jim, I've taken away some things for myself as well. And so until next time, we'll see you on the Today Count Show. Thanks for spending part of your day with us on the Today Count Show. If today's conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or helped you grow, share it with someone in your circle, because we're better when we grow together. And be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected with us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And remember, real change doesn't happen someday. It happens today. Until next time, keep showing up, keep building, keep making today count.